It's finally here, the most anticipated film in recent memory for all the wrong reasons. A movie that's been mercilessly mocked and derided since its announcement, with a woman of Colombian descent cast as the titular Snow White in a stunning and brave move by Disney, turning the classic fairy tale about a princess with
Skin white as snow.
into yet another vehicle for modern messaging, which was only exacerbated by the casting of Gal Gadot as the evil queen jealous of Snow White's beauty, who looks like a supermodel next to Rachel Zegler, and the lead actress's dismissal of the 1937 classic.
There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird, weird.
Belying her own ignorance and disrespect for the first animated feature-length film in history, instantly turning a large swath of the audience against her. To make matters worse, after Peter Dinklage, who'd already made his fortune from Game of Thrones, criticized the casting of actors with dwarfism for reinforcing stereotypes, Disney, in their infinite political correctness, decided to axe the dwarves from the movie altogether, leading to this inspired reimagining with 7 so-called magical creatures, which was widely panned across the internet, forcing a pivot back to dwarves, but in CG form and looking like something out of a nightmare, which still cost little people job opportunities in the end. To say this was poorly received would be an understatement. And just when it looked like things were hitting rock bottom, the lead actresses very publicly found themselves on the opposite sides of the Gaza conflict, prompting threats of boycotts and protests of the film. In a twist of irony, mere days before the movie's release, Zegler cosplayed as the original voice actress and paid homage to the classic that she had previously derided.
It's Hollywood, baby.
Seeing the writing on the wall, Disney cancelled the UK premiere of the movie and scaled the US premiere down, with tightly controlled press events in an attempt to avoid open interviews. So, after all that, is the movie any good?
They did it! They did it! They ruined everything with this PC bullshit!
I'll try my best to give a non-biased review, but let's be real, after all that, it's gonna be pretty tough. The best I can say about this movie is that the songs are mostly good. The classic ones anyway. The new ones feel really out of place. And Rachel Zegler can sing. She has talent in that regard. But that's pretty much where the positives end. These live action remakes Disney seems hellbent on are questionable products to begin with, inevitably straying from the whimsy of the cartoon originals, while being constrained by the realities of live action filming, jamming real actors into CG environments to interact with CG elements. You're inevitably going to lose something in the transition. This is especially true in the case of this movie. Everything looks and feels so discordant, and it's mainly the visual aspect that throws you. The whole thing has a very artificial feeling. The world, the animals, the dwarves, the buildings, the costumes worn by the actual actors, the extremely diverse makeup of the very small feeling 1500s German town, and so on. Everything clashes in some way. The dwarves are horrific with their disproportionate heads, and Dopey is the most nightmarish of them all. Damned unsettling. Like a cross between the Mad Magazine guy and the original cartoon version in an Uncanny Valley CG body. Horrific. I will say that Dopey goes through a bit of a story arc, which is kinda nice, but that look. It's like original Sonic levels of discomfort. The costumes the actors wear, particularly the bandits, are totally conflicting. The lead bandit, Jonathan, Snow White's love interest, looks like a grunge band member with a plaid hoodie, which just clashes with Zegler's ridiculously over-the-top dress. It's so bizarre to see. Even without anyone else around, Zegler's dress is so bright and outstanding, especially against the CGI backdrop. The first time you see her in it, when she goes to pick apples, I almost did a spit take. It looks so absurd. I heard my wife groan in pain. It works for the cartoon, which, by the way, is far more subdued in both style and color than this. But for live action, it looks horrible. The world is all CGI, or at least it feels like it, and then you have the human actors, who look completely out of place against this very artificial, and for some reason cheap-feeling background. Like it's all set dressing at the theater. Disney may as well have made it entirely CG at that point. Why even make it live action when 80% of the stuff on screen isn't live action? And then you have the disconnect between the dwarves and the humans on multiple levels. So, after who knows how many reshoots, the 7 magical creatures are now a group of bandits, with the same actors, looking just as silly as in this picture. The problem is that there's an actual actor with dwarfism in the group, who then talks and interacts with the CGI dwarves, when he looks like a far more appropriate dwarf. But he's not. He's a bandit. And the whole thing just blew my mind. To see the CG dwarves interacting with an actual dwarf who's not playing one of the seven dwarves. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I can't believe Disney left that part in. Don't they know how ridiculous it looks? They even have Martin Kleba in the movie, who you might recognize from Pirates of the Caribbean, but instead of actually playing Grumpy, he's just voicing Grumpy, which is so messed up. You have an actor with dwarfism in the movie, just not actually acting in person. It's wild. Disney should have had actual actors with dwarfism playing the dwarves. They would have been far better than those CG monstrosities. Instead, the studio decided to take the strangest, most convoluted, and expensive route to get to where we are, just to placate Peter Dinklage. It's truly breathtaking to see. And then we have the bandits themselves, who feel like they were from the first take of the movie when there weren't supposed to be any dwarves. And the CG dwarves were just layered on top and crammed into the older footage with liberal cuts and edits. The bandits feel more like Robin Hood and his merry men than anything in Snow White. The dialogue feels out of place for these people, and some have names and behave like we're supposed to know them when they're thrust into the story really abruptly and then fade away, only to show up again at the end. It's a mess. Which brings me to the leading ladies themselves. Gal Gadot tries really hard, but she's not right for the role at all, and her singing scenes were awful. Her acting is purposefully over-exaggerated, but man, it doesn't work. She's got the look for it, and her costuming was probably the best in the film, but that's the best I can say. When the 1937 cartoon was able to portray a more convincing evil queen than a high-paid Hollywood actress, you know you've got issues. Not to mention that the core premise of the movie, the evil queen being jealous of Snow White's beauty, is rendered moot, because no one's going to believe that Rachel Zegler is hotter than Gal Gadot. Sometimes beauty is objective, and this is one of those times. The movie tries to get around it by twisting the mirror's logic to include inner beauty, and by tacking on the idea of the fairest one of all to mean fair, like equal treatment and niceness to others, or equity probably, since it's Disney. Which they had to do, because to me, Rachel Zegler looks worse than I've seen her in any other movie. I'm not saying she's totally ugly, but that haircut is ridiculous and makes her face look weird and unattractive. I've seen her in other stuff. She's good looking. But the makeup and costume department didn't do her any favors in this. That haircut is just terrible. It's different from the cartoon even. Her emoting was really poor, I thought. There are times when she's trying to look angry or conflicted, but it all ends up looking like something in between. I thought her performance in general was really weak, with the exception of the musical numbers, which she did do a very good job of. Story-wise, this hits a lot of the beats of the original, which is admittedly a simple story, but then it's padded out in sequences that feel like fluff. The animals in the forest are there, the dwarves are there, the poison apple is there, the kiss is there, though it's from a bandit and not a prince. But then the studio had to go and add an addendum to the story because it's 2025, and ending with a kiss just isn't good enough, I guess. It's like Disney desperately wanted to get past the kiss so they could get on with what they really wanted to make the movie about, girl bossing. Zegler almost immediately jumps up after the kiss and says, "It's time," and proceeds to sing a song about becoming the leader she always knew she should be. The queen, rather than taking a dive off a cliff in the original, instead goes back to the castle, so Snow White can show up at the town later looking like something out of The Handmaid's Tale, red cloak and all, ready to wage class warfare. The townsfolk, who probably had no idea that she'd been gone for the last few days, immediately gather behind her without a word and march to the castle to confront the queen, where Snow White promptly convinces the guards to lay down their weapons via some cringeworthy emoting, kind words, and a song. The queen, angry and abandoned, runs up to her magic mirror and smashes it out of frustration, which opens some kind of magical vortex that sucks her in before repairing itself and positively affirming Snow White. It's all so forced and fake, and you know why it's happening. Personally, since they're going the class warrior route, I think they should have just gone with the original fairy tale ending, where Snow White forces the queen to dance in scorching iron shoes until she dies, at her wedding no less, though they might lose that PG rating. There's really no heart to the movie at all. I didn't feel the chemistry between the bandit leader and Snow White, even though the original isn't much better, but it's about the same here. And when she jumps up and rushes to the castle after that, it's like the whole core of the movie is meaningless. No more wonder, no more romanticism. Eventually, I felt like I was just watching images go by on a screen without feeling anything. Disney princess was never meant to be a derogatory term. Disney built its brand on princesses and love stories before deciding that it was wrong for women to be feminine and men to be masculine. This movie is symptomatic of the woke era. It encapsulates everything wrong with modern movie making in Hollywood, like prioritizing messaging above story, extreme political correctness to the point of depriving marginalized people of a job, the unfaltering emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion to the detriment of the source material and the very name and core concept of the film itself, Snow White. Even Disney realized how absurd it all is, explaining that Snow White's name came from a particularly snowy night rather than her fair skin, and twisting the beauty aspect with statements about inner beauty and fairness. I could go on, but it's mind boggling to me that a 1937 animated movie can capture a greater sense of magic and wonder than a 2025, allegedly $250 million Hollywood movie can. Somewhere along the way, Disney lost the magic. I really, really dislike this movie, as I'm sure you can tell. It might be enjoyable for families or kids, but from where I'm sitting, this thing is a 2 out of 10. Some of the songs are good, but the rest is rotten to the core. I am probably biased by the behind the scenes drama, I'll freely admit it. But what's on screen feels like a perfect confluence of everything going wrong that could have gone wrong. If you were looking for a more garish version of Snow White, with less heart and more political grandstanding, then Disney's got you covered. Well, that's all I've got for now. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and as always, thanks for watching.
I mean, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so.